For split page number 3, we had to watch a documentary called The 13th. A lot of things in this documentary that stood out to me were how broken the police system is, and how many laws that were said to be abolished that are still being enforced today by the police and by our government. It's crazy to me that the government can enforce such laws while claiming to care so much about their people. The very first thing that they mention in the documentary is that the United States is home to 5% of the world's population, but we house 25% of the world's prisoners. A lot of the people that are being held in prison today were either wrongfully imprisoned or being imprisoned on small charges such as drug offenses. Something important that this documentary talked about was the 13th Amendment, and the 13th Amendment makes it unconstitutional for someone to be held as a slave. There are exceptions to this law, which to me includes the prisoners. There are so many people in the prison that are being used as slaves and doing labor that they're not being paid for, and it's almost the same thing as slavery. One of the tactics that presidential candidates used were going to lower class communities and persuading them into thinking that there were so many problems among their community that the only way they could fix them was by voting Republican and manipulating them into thinking that they would fix all of the drug problems. The fact that so many of these men in power think drug offenses are the biggest problem in these communities says enough to me about how broken the justice system is. There are so many more issues that could be focused on, but instead they target the ones that they know will make them look good to the people. One of the things the documentary talked about was the prison population, and from 1970 to 1980, the prison population had grew by almost 200,000. That's only within 10 years. By 1990, the U.S. prison population had hit 1,179,200. This was more than triple than what it was in the 80s. Most of these prisoners were coming from the war on drugs, but this war on drugs wasn't ever about the drugs. It was really about the wrongful imprisonment of more black people and other people of color. The term war on drugs was coined by Nixon, but Ronald Reagan started an actual war when this was not one of the biggest problems in the US, but he made it seem like it was to get more people on his side. Reagan was so determined to make this a bigger issue. While yes, drugs are bad, there are more things that he could have focused on. Something else that this documentary talked about was the Omnibus Crime Bill, which was responsible for a massive expansion of the prison system. This was providing so much more money to the law enforcement system, and it provided a lot of money to enforce things that we would consider abuse today. Our law enforcement system was built on so many broken ideals that are still enforced today, and they wonder why so many people are screaming to defund the police. There's absolutely no reason the police should have this much power. There's no reason that they should be getting this much money either. If the police really want to help fix the problem, then they should be working with the smaller communities in order to help make them better. There are police officers that are getting away with murder simply because of their job title, and it's absolutely unfair. Taking care of the amount of people in prison should be one of the most important things that the president sees for this country, but it's not. There are so many people in prison that are there for small drug charges, especially for drugs such as weed. There's absolutely no reason somebody should be in prison for as many years as they are for having weed on them when they're being searched by an officer. Something else that stood out to me in the documentary was ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. It's a political lobbying group, and they write laws that are given to Republicans. This is a private club for politicians and large corporations. This just goes to show that the government does not actually care about its people. It has never been about the people, and these groups are meant to keep the rich rich and the poor people under. The legislators try to keep this a secret, but they failed. And they wonder why so many of the American people have a hard time trusting in their government. If you stop and take a look at the prison system in other countries, you realize that our prison system is one of the only prison systems that's still like this. Rather than focusing on rehabilitation for these people, they focus on more punishment and free labor. Having our prison system focus so much on punishment rather than rehabilitation only leads to the deterioration of mental health of a lot of the prisoners. Something else that happened in this documentary that was important was they mentioned that once you become a felon, you lose a lot of your constitutional rights. The Jim Crow laws that are said to be abolished are just rebranded as new laws against prisoners. This documentary didn't teach me anything new, but it made me realize how many broken things we have going on in this system in the US. What we need to focus on is how we're going to fix it and not why it was enforced in the first place. Our ancestors made a lot of mistakes, but what we need to do is correct what they did and make things right.